Who the hell is in my daughter's piano room? Cassian Valecrest's voice cracked through the dark mansion just as a glass shattered upstairs. He stormed down the marble hallway, jaw tight, security alarms blinking red across the walls. The piano hadn't been touched since his wife died. Not once. But tonight, music echoed through the house anyway. He shoved the doors open. Lyric sat barefoot on top of the piano bench, smiling, and beside her, still wearing a black Maid uniform damp from dishwater, Zoreya moved slowly across the ivory keys with burned fingers wrapped in torn gauze. Blood spotted 2 white notes. Cassian froze. Then Lyric whispered one quiet word. Again. But Zoreya suddenly pulled her hands away from the piano, staring at the fresh blood running across the keys. Black Maid stories gets me every time with scenes like this. If you're winding down tonight somewhere quiet, would you keep playing to the pain for a child like Lyric? That piano had been dead for almost a year, and now the only person waking it up was the maid nobody noticed. And Cassian still hadn't said what he was about to do next. Zoreya stepped back from the piano first. Not Cassian. She pulled the bloody gauze tighter around her fingers and lowered her eyes like she already expected to be fired. The giant room stayed silent, except for the soft hum of the chandelier overhead. Lyric slid off the piano bench. Small feet, bare against the cold marble. Then she walked straight past her father and stopped beside Zoreya instead. Cassian's throat tightened. Lyric, he said carefully, come here. The little girl didn't move. That hit harder than shouting. Morton Keene appeared near the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks as he looked between them. His face barely changed. What's going on here? He asked. Nobody answered right away. Zoreya grabbed the cleaning towel hanging from the piano and quietly wiped the blood from the keys before anyone else touched them. Even that looked practiced. Careful. Fast. Cassian watched her hands. The scars stretched past the gloves now, pale and shiny under the light. How long has she been in here? Morton asked. Just a night, Zoreya said softly. But Lyric suddenly shook her head. Cassian looked down at his daughter. It was the first reaction she'd given anyone all week. Morton noticed too. His eyes narrowed slightly. You let staff members onto the house at night now? He asked. Cassian ignored him. His focus stayed on Lyric, who had quietly reached for the edge of Zoreya's sleeve with 2 fingers, like she was afraid the woman might disappear if she let go. Kids always know who feels safe. Zoreya slowly knelt beside her. You should sleep, honey, she whispered. Lyric looked at the piano, then back at her. No smile this time. Just waiting. Cassian finally stepped closer. Why were you playing? Zoreya hesitated only a second. She was crying. Simple answer. No drama attached to it. Morton gave a dry laugh. And you thought breaking house rules was appropriate? Zoreya stood again. I heard her from the kitchen. Cassian's jaw shifted. The kitchen was 2 floors away. That meant Lyric had been crying long enough for someone downstairs to hear her. Nobody else moved to help. Not security. Not the night staff. Just the maid. Morton folded his arms. This kind of emotional dependency can turn into a problem very quickly. Cassian looked at him sharply. But before he could answer, Lyric suddenly reached toward the piano again and pressed one shaking finger onto the bloodstained key Zoreya had missed. The next morning, Zoreya entered through the staff door carrying a paper bag folded tight at the top. Snow melted off her boots in small gray puddles near the kitchen sink. Nobody looked up when she walked in except the older dishwasher rinsing pans in silence. A housekeeper passed her a clipboard without speaking. 3rd floor today. Zoreya nodded once. Upstairs, the main dining room sat untouched. 8 plates, 8 crystal glasses. Not a single chair pulled out. Cassian stood near the windows in a pressed black shirt, reading messages off a tablet, while someone on speaker argued about a delayed project in Singapore. He never looked toward the staff when they entered. Morton did. Always. His eyes followed Zoreya across the room as she replaced a coffee cup near Cassian's elbow. You're late, Morton said. She checked the clock on the wall. 2 minutes. Bus stalled, she replied quietly. Morton slid the cup slightly farther from her hand with one finger before taking it himself. Cassian kept reading. Lyric ate this morning? Morton asked him. No. Therapist arrives at 11. Cassian finally glanced up. Cancel it. Morton lowered his coffee slowly. Again, she locked herself in the bathroom when they got here yesterday. That child needs structure, not attachment to a maid. The word landed hard in the room. Maid, not her name. Zoreya kept wiping the table. Small circles. Steady hand. But the rag slowed for half a second when Lyric quietly appeared barefoot near the doorway. The little girl looked straight at Zoreya. Not her father. Not Morton. Just her. Cassian noticed immediately. Lyric, he said. Breakfast. No response. The child walked farther into the room instead, stopping beside the cleaning cart. Her eyes dropped to the folded paper bag resting on the bottom shelf. Zoreya crouched quickly before Morton could speak. Careful, sweetheart. She opened the bag, slightly. Inside sat half a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in napkins. Lyric stared at it, then slowly reached inside and broke off a tiny piece. Morton's jaw tightened. Staff meals are not for residents. She can have it, Zoreya said softly. That's not the point. Cassian watched the entire exchange in silence. His daughter hadn't touched breakfast prepared by a private chef, but now she stood eating dry sandwich crust beside a cleaning cart, one small bite at a time. Then Lyric did something worse. She reached up and slipped her tiny hand into Zoreya's burned fingers right in front of Morton. The therapist lasted 11 minutes. Everyone heard the screaming. Cassian stepped out of his office just as the woman hurried down the hallway, clutching her leather bag against her chest. Her lipstick was smeared near one corner. Behind her, Lyric's bedroom door slammed hard enough to shake the framed photos on the wall. I'm done, the therapist snapped. Your daughter threw a lamp at me. She's 7, Cassian said coldly. She aimed for my head. Morton appeared seconds later, already irritated. What happened now? Another crash exploded upstairs. Glass this time. Cassian rubbed his jaw once. No anger yet, just exhaustion. The therapist pointed toward the staircase. She locked herself inside again. Nobody moved immediately. Not the guards. Not the house staff quietly watching from the far hallway. Then another sound came through the ceiling. Piano keys. One sharp, ugly smash across the strings. Cassian started upstairs fast. Morton followed. By the time they reached the second floor, Lyric's room looked wrecked. Books ripped apart. Pillows across the floor. One lamp shattered against the wall. But the girl wasn't inside anymore. The balcony doors stood slightly open. Snow blew through the curtains. Cassian's face drained. Lyric! No answer. He rushed outside onto the narrow upper terrace, shoes crunching against snow. Nothing. Then Morton pointed downward sharply. There. At ground level near the east garden, Lyric ran barefoot through the snow in thin pajamas, clutching something black against her chest. Cassian bolted for stairs. Servants scattered out his path. By the time he reached the lower hall, the front doors had already opened. Cold air blasted inside. Outside, Lyric stumbled near the frozen fountain. Still running. Still crying. And 20 feet ahead of her, crossing toward the service entrance with headphones around her neck and cleaning gloves stuffed into her coat pocket, was Zoreya. She turned at the sound, saw Lyric, froze. The child ran straight into her legs hard enough to nearly knock herself over. Cassian stopped several feet away, breathing hard. Lyric, he said firmly, come here. Now! The little girl grabbed tighter onto Zoreya's coat instead. Morton stepped forward immediately. Miss Bennett, step away from her. Zoreya looked trapped for half a second. One wrong move here, and she was finished. Staff had already gathered near the windows inside the mansion, watching. Cassian held his hand out toward his daughter. Lyric! The child buried her face deeper against Zoreya's side. Snow collected across Zoreya's shoulders while she stood perfectly still. Then she did the one thing Morton absolutely did not want. She touched Lyric's hair gently, slowly, like calming a frightened animal. You're freezing, sweetheart, she whispered. Morton's voice sharpened instantly. Do not encourage this. But Lyric suddenly started crying harder. Not screaming, not raging. Real crying now, shoulders shaking. Tiny fingers twisting tightly into Zoreya's coat sleeve. Cassian stared at his daughter, like he barely recognized her. He hadn't heard that sound since the funeral. Zoreya swallowed once, then crossed the line completely. She looked directly at Cassian. "Sir, she doesn't need another therapist right now." Morton actually laughed under his breath. Cassian's eyes narrowed. "You're giving parenting advice now?" Zoreya's fingers tightened around the child instinctively. She needs someone to stay calm long enough for her to feel safe. Silence. Even the wind felt loud. A maid standing barefoot in the snow beside one of the richest men in the city, telling him how to handle his own daughter. Morton stepped closer immediately. "That's enough." But Lyric suddenly lifted her head from Zoreya's coat and reached both arms toward her instead. Not toward Cassian, toward the maid. "Put her down." Cassian's voice came low this time, worse than yelling. Snow whipped across the courtyard while Lyric clung to Zoreya's neck with both arms wrapped tight. The little girl's socks were soaked through. Her knees shook from the cold, but she still refused to let go. Zoreya looked between father and daughter carefully. "She's freezing." "I said put her down." Morton stepped beside Cassian immediately. "Now, Miss Bennett." Several staff members stood behind the glass doors inside the mansion, pretending not to stare. Everyone was staring. Zoreya slowly lowered Lyric back onto the ground. The second her feet touched snow, the child grabbed onto Zoreya's coat again. Hard. Cassian took one sharp breath through his nose. "Lyric, inside." Nothing. The girl pressed herself tighter against the maid's side. Morton shook his head once. "This is exactly what I warned you about." Cassian's eyes stayed on Zoreya. "Did you encourage this behavior?" "No. You expect me to believe this just happened naturally?" "She came to me." "You're the employee here." Morton cut in. "Not family." Zoreya's jaw tightened slightly. Small movement. But Cassian saw it. Morton stepped closer. "Do you understand boundaries?" "I do." "Then why are you touching his daughter?" Lyric suddenly cried harder at the tone in his voice. Zoreya crouched instinctively toward her. Hey, it's okay." "Don't." Morton pointed directly at her. "Stop inserting yourself." Cassian still hadn't moved. Didn't offend her. Didn't stop Morton. That silence said enough. Zoreya slowly straightened again. Snow collected in her eyelashes now. Her burned fingers had turned bright red from the cold. "She was alone outside," she said quietly. "And somehow she only runs to you?" Morton snapped back. Nobody answered, because that part was true. Cassian finally walked closer to Lyric and knelt in front of her. "Look at me." The little girl stared at the ground. "Lyric." Nothing. His hand hovered near her shoulder. She flinched. Tiny movement. Tiny. But it hit him like a slap. Morton noticed too. "You see? This attachment is poisoning her routine." Cassian stood immediately. "That's enough." But Morton kept going. "She's a maid, Cassian. Not a specialist. Not trained. Not approved. This is emotional dependency formed through instability and grief." Zoreya stayed silent. Morton turned toward her sharply. "How long have you been encouraging this?" "I haven't." "You expect us to believe a child this withdrawn suddenly bonds with a stranger overnight. She likes music." Morton laughed once. "Cold. So now you're treating trauma with piano songs?" Cassian's face hardened slightly. Wrong thing to say. But Morton didn't stop. "You walk into restricted rooms. You touch the child. You feed her staff food. You undermine therapists in front of her father. And now she refuses to separate from you." Every sentence landed harder. Not because Morton yelled. Because nobody interrupted him. Zoreya looked toward Cassian once. Just once. Waiting. Nothing came. That hurt more than Morton. The staff inside had gone completely still now. One housekeeper slowly lowered her eyes toward the floor. Nobody wanted to witness this. But nobody walked away either. Morton folded his gloves into his coat pocket carefully. "Tell me something honestly, Miss Bennett." She said nothing. "Did you know who this family was before you applied here?" Cassian's eyes flicked toward him immediately. Too late. Morton already saw the reaction. "There it is," he said softly. Zoreya's shoulders stiffened. "Answer the question." "I needed work." "That's not what I asked." "She applied through the agency," Cassian said. Morton ignored him completely. Women have tried this before, he continued. Caretakers, assistants, tutors, build emotional access to the child first, then leverage sympathy against the parent. Zoreya blinked once slowly, like she was trying very hard not to react. Lyric suddenly looked up at Morton with wet, angry eyes. No. Everybody froze. Cassian turned instantly. Morton's mouth stopped moving. The little girl's voice came out cracked and tiny from crying, but it was clear. No. First word she had spoken to another person in months. And it happened while defending the maid. Cassian stared at his daughter in complete shock. Lyric grabbed tighter onto Zoreya's sleeve. She stays. Silence. Real silence. Even the wind seemed gone now. Morton recovered first. This is manipulation. Cassian looked at him sharply. Enough. No, you need to hear this. Morton stepped closer again. You lost your wife because you stopped paying attention to warning signs. Don't make another emotional mistake because a lonely child found comfort in the nearest warm body. The second the words left his mouth, Cassian grabbed him by the coat. Fast. Violent. Morton stumbled backward against the frozen fountain edge. Do not talk about my wife again. Lyric gasped softly. Staff near the doors jumped. Morton slowly pulled Cassian's hand off his coat. Then start acting like her father. Cassian's chest rose hard once. Twice. Zoreya stepped backward slightly with Lyric, still holding onto her sleeve. She understood something now. This house wasn't cold because people stopped loving each other. It was cold because grief had turned every conversation into a weapon. Cassian turned toward her suddenly. Dark eyes. Tight jaw. Go inside. Not gentle. Not cruel either. Just dangerous. Zoreya didn't move immediately. Lyric tightened her grip again. Cassian saw it, and for one ugly second, something close to resentment crossed his face while he looked at the connection between them. Cassian didn't sleep. At 3 a.m, the mansion lights were still glowing faintly across the lower floor, while snow pressed softly against the windows. He sat alone in his office with Zoreya's burned glove resting beside his laptop. The fingertip hold bothered him, not because of the damage, because someone had stitched around it by hand to keep using it anyway. Morton's words still echoed through the house. Manipulation. Attachment. Mistake. Cassian opened the employee file again. Zoreya Bennett. Night staff only. No emergency contacts listed. Minimal work history for the last 3 years. Too clean. He stared at the screen another second, then picked up his phone. Run a deeper search, he said quietly. Everything. By sunrise, a thin folder sat on his desk. Cassian opened it while the coffee beside him cooled untouched. First page. Chicago Conservatory of Music. A photo clip from an old article showed Zoreya younger, standing beside a grand piano in a dark concert hall. No gloves. No scars. Sharp black dress. Small smile. The next page stopped him cold. Fire damage photos. Burned seats. Collapsed stage lights. Paramedic reports. Witness statements. Cassian flipped pages faster now. One line circled in red marker. Instructor re-entered the building multiple times despite active structural collapse. Another page. 6 children survived. 1 adult hospitalized. Severe burns to both hands. Permanent nerve damage. Cassian leaned back slowly. The room stayed completely silent except for paper shifting beneath his fingers. Then he noticed another document clipped underneath. Civil lawsuit. Insurance dispute. Employment termination. Case dismissed. No compensation awarded. A grainy courthouse photo showed Zoreya leaving alone with bandages covering both hands while reporters crowded someone else entirely. Cassian stared at the image longer than he meant to. No anger on her face. No performance. Just exhaustion. A knock hit the office door. Morton stepped inside, adjusting his tie. Board call starts in 20. Cassian didn't answer immediately. He slid the photograph across the desk instead. Morton glanced down briefly. What is this? She was a piano instructor. So, she ran back into a burning building 6 times. Morton barely reacted, and Cassian looked up sharply, and she lost the use of her hands. Morton shrugged once. People survive tragedies every day. Cassian stood, fast enough to make Morton pause. She didn't manipulate my daughter. Morton crossed his arms. Cassian, she heard a crying child and walked toward it while everyone else walked away. That does not make her qualified. No, Cassian snapped. It makes her human. Silence hit the room hard. Morton's jaw tightened slightly now. First crack all morning. You're getting emotionally involved. Cassian stepped around the desk slowly. That little girl didn't speak for almost a year. Morton stayed calm. Trauma responses fluctuate. She defended Zoreya. That's exactly the problem. Cassian laughed once under his breath. Not amused. Tired. You know what I saw yesterday? He asked quietly. My daughter eating dry sandwich crust beside a cleaning cart because she finally trusted somebody enough to stand still near them. Morton's eyes narrowed. Cassian kept going. And every therapist you brought into this house made her panic worse. That maid is crossing boundaries. She crossed them because nobody else was helping. Morton stepped closer now. You're letting guilt cloud your judgment. Wrong word. Cassian's face hardened immediately. You don't get to use my wife against me again. Morton held his stare, then act rationally. Before Cassian could answer, movement flashed across the office windows outside. Both men turned. Down in the courtyard below, Zoreya had just arrived for her shift. Same dark coat, same paper bag folded tight in one hand. But she stopped walking the second she noticed something near the front steps. Lyric, still in pajamas, curled asleep against the cold stone wall beside the entrance. Waiting for her, Zoreya dropped the paper bag instantly. She crossed the courtyard fast, boots slipping slightly on the frozen stone before she reached Lyric and knelt beside her. Hey, sweetheart. The little girl stirred slowly against the wall. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Tiny fingers curled tight around the edge of Zoreya's forgotten black glove. Zoreya pulled off her own coat without hesitation and wrapped it around the child first. What were you thinking? She whispered softly. Lyric only leaned closer into her. Upstairs, Cassian watched from the office window without moving. Morton stood beside him, silent this time. Below them, Zoreya rubbed warmth back into Lyric's hands carefully with her scarred fingers while snow gathered in her hair. No cameras, no audience, no performance. Cassian turned and walked out of the office. By the time he reached the front hall, Zoreya had already carried Lyric inside. The child stayed curled against her shoulder half asleep, while house staff quietly stepped aside to clear a path. Nobody said a word. Zoreya stopped near the staircase when she saw Cassian approaching. For a second, all three of them stayed still. Then Cassian held out a small object toward her, the repaired music box. Zoreya blinked once in surprise. You fixed it, he said quietly. She adjusted Lyric slightly higher against her shoulder. It just needed a spring replacement. Cassian nodded once. His eyes dropped toward her hands. The burns looked worse without gloves in the morning light. I read the reports, he said. Zoreya's expression changed immediately. Not fear, just tired recognition. Cassian continued carefully. You never told anyone here. You didn't ask. That landed harder than he expected. Behind them, Morton appeared near the dining room entrance. Cassian, not now. Morton stopped speaking. Zoreya noticed that too. Small shift. Small but clear. Lyric stirred again, face pressed against Zoreya's neck now. One tiny hand still gripping the front of her coat. Cassian looked at his daughter for a long moment, then toward the staircase. Her room's cold in the mornings, he said quietly. The fireplace downstairs stays warmer. Zoreya understood immediately. An invitation without calling it one. She hesitated. Cassian stepped aside first, not commanding, making space. Zoreya walked past him slowly, carrying Lyric toward the lower sitting room, while the fire crackled softly ahead. Cassian stayed near the hallway entrance, watching them disappear around the corner. A minute later, faint piano notes drifted through the house again. Very soft, very slow. This time, nobody stopped them. 3 months later, the piano room looked different. Warm light now. One lamp near the window. A small blanket folded over the bench. Fingerprint smudges across the black lacquer. Nobody rushed to clean anymore. Lyric sat at the piano in thick socks, carefully pressing one key at a time while snow drifted softly outside the glass walls. Wrong notes, then better ones. Zoreya stood beside her, holding sheet music low against her chest. No gloves tonight. The scars across her hands caught gold under the lamp. Lyric missed another note and looked up nervously. Zoreya tapped the rhythm gently against the piano wood. Once, twice. Lyric tried again. This time the melody held together. From the hallway, Cassian watched quietly without stepping inside. His tie hung loose now, sleeves rolled back, one hand resting against the doorway. Neither of them noticed him at first. Then Lyric looked over. Small smile. She slid sideways on the bench, making room. Cassian hesitated. Zoreya glanced toward the empty space beside their daughter. No words, just waiting. After a moment, Cassian crossed the room slowly and sat beside them. The piano keys moved again beneath 3 different hands. Soft notes filling the house long after the snow outside stopped falling. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting someone into your home. It's letting them matter after you've already learned how to live without anyone. If you were Cassian, watching your child trust someone before trusting you again, would you hold on tighter, or would you be brave enough to make space for that person too? I'd really like to know what you think after this one.